Ladies and gentlemen, as we await this all-important ruling from the Supreme Court on the ongoing crisis at the National Legislature, I find it not only expedient but compelling to add my voice to the numerous calls of concerns and call for an assertive role of the Supreme Court in laying this matter to rest. As we all know that the final arbiter of justice, law in this country remains the Supreme Court. That means whatever comes from the Supreme Court is final, and we don't question it. This puts the Supreme Court in a very strategic and all-important position that carries a lot of weight on the political stability of this country. We have followed very keenly the crisis at the legislature over the removal of the speaker. This, in my view, has dragged far more than was necessary. Like many others, I too will add my voice to the fact that the Supreme Court could not be as clear as possible and assertive as possible in their rulings. We have seen members of the legislature go to the Supreme Court for interpretation of the law. This is what is expected. That's why we have three branches of government. The legislature will make the law, the Supreme Court will interpret the law, the judiciary will interpret the law, and the executive will execute the law. We have three distinct roles, and they are designed that way for a purpose: to maintain the independence of the decision making in this regard, that guarantees the political stability on a tripod arrangement of our government structure. Today, as the Supreme Court prepares their ruling or debate the pros and cons and merits and demerits of this case on both sides, I want to caution the Supreme Court that now, more than ever before, they need to remove ambiguities and be very clear on this matter, unequivocal. We are at the verge of a national crisis that has not only drawn the House of Representatives into crisis, but has also drawn the executive and the Senate. Today, this debate is dividing the population, remaining a big distraction from the efforts of nation building that we all are faced with. The Supreme Court, in my view, and I speak directly to them now, you have an opportunity to salvage what is left of the confidence of the people in the courts of this nation. You have a renewed opportunity to reset not only the pace but the tone of our politics. I will urge you to avoid politics as much as possible and deal with the technical interpretation and thereby application of the law. Politics is played in the legislature and in the executive, not in the judiciary. The people of this country have set boundaries for themselves. We have set limitations because of where we come from. More than a decade of civil war with hundreds of thousands of dead and unimaginable destruction and a setback of 2-3 generations. No, we're not prepared for any more crisis. So more than ever before, the Supreme Court will have to step up to the plate and in a very clear tone come up with a ruling in the best interest of the nation by respecting the Constitution and by directing the country on the basis of the rule of law. We have seen the House of Representatives, I'm saying this because we follow the pattern and the trend. We all know when this crisis started, contending parties went to the legislature, to the judiciary, to the Supreme Court. At first they were told, go back there and settle this matter. That didn't work. They went back. Supreme comes up with this fantastic big word, ultra-virus. You now have unto yourself the authority to perform the task that you have now embarked on. Go back to status quo. You're not just speaking to the legislature, you're speaking to the Liberian people. You're speaking to a population that has a high degree of illiteracy, not even understanding basic English words, let alone foreign languages, introducing the law, jargons. I urge you to avoid all jargons now. I urge the Supreme Court to avoid all complicated terminologies that are prone to be misinterpretation. Let us be clear to the matter. As much as a lot of the educated population will understand this, it was vague and ambiguous to the population. To the point that the legislature, both sides had their own interpretation and thereby acted in regard to same. We have seen the Justice Minister come up with his interpretation, advising the executive. We've seen the Senate taking sides because of the interpretation and recommendation and advice of the Chief Justice. We've seen the executive follow suit. We've seen the population divided because of the ambiguity and the misinterpretation and diverse interpretation. So not use the word misinterpretation, but diverse interpretations because of the nature of the ruling, its ambiguity. So as we prepare for this, let me caution the Supreme Court. To whom much is given, much is expected. You've been given this God-given right to provide the right interpretation of this matter, judge the right judgment and the right interpretation, so that people can be guided by the rule of law, be guided by the Supreme Court, and that every other actor after that ruling will have to comply. Like I said, the legislature makes the law, the judiciary interprets the law, the executive is compelled to apply the law as interpreted by the Supreme Court. So it's a huge responsibility. This is not a matter of CDC or Unity Party. This is not a matter of Coon Black or Kofa Black. This is a matter of the political stability of this nation. And as I conclude, let me emphasize political stability, not only in the present, but in the future. Today, if the Supreme Court cannot be clear and assertive in their ruling and insist on the right interpretation, and we don't respect the Supreme Court today, believe me, a few years down the line, when we have elections, and a lot of controversy ensues, and people go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court do their ruling, does a ruling, nobody will listen to the Supreme Court. And we will fight and destroy each other here. Because as far as they're concerned, the Supreme Court has rendered itself toothless. This is democracy. three branches of government designed for a reason. And I can assure you that it's because of times like these that this design was planned and constructed in this manner. So I just want to thank you. I just had to add my voice to this, letting the Supreme Court know that if they take this thing lightly and they don't interpret this and judge this matter properly and come up with the right ruling, it has not only the potential but the propensity, the probability of destroying this country from within. So I pray that they will make the right decision. We have a lot of wise people in there, and I'm sure they will come up with the right decision. I'm only concerned now after that is to advise everyone else to respect it and comply with it. We're talking about a country of 5 million people plus, cannot subject it to the will and pleasure of a few hundreds who play politics with the people of this nation. Thank you.
Well, my name is Yan Titokwa, report for OKFN. There are a lot of people who think that this has been long overdue for the fact that the Supreme Court had this matter in their hand initially to decide on the matter, and he has gone a very long time where the majority leaders has been steering the affairs of the House of Representatives, and the executive seem to be working. Is it something that the Supreme Court can overdo at the moment? What are you seeking? What are you seeking for?
A lot of my interventions have more to do with the long-term consequences than the present. You know, like I said, if tomorrow we are at a crisis level and you come back to the Supreme Court, who had not assumed unto itself that full responsibility and provide direction now, you will compromise your position tomorrow. And if the position of the Supreme Court is compromised, the future of this country is compromised. Because the law, the rule of law, the Constitution is the bedrock, is the foundation of any civilized nation. In the absence of that, there will be chaos. So for the future, for the sake of the future, for the sake of the next generation, we ought to hold this thing here very carefully. Like I said, this goes beyond politics. It has to do with the future of this country.
Yeah, correct.
And the law is the law. It doesn't matter how far away it goes. It doesn't matter where it goes. If the pull factor is right, they will say it's right. And we'll all comply. If the pull factor is right, we'll say it's right. We'll all comply.
Yes, I'm Sylvester Chirople. I work for the Spoon Network. I love the way you put it that the law is the law, and it is about the rule of law. In the case that the Supreme Court rules and specifically taking a side according to the law, and that another side coming to say, no, we disagree and we are going beyond. Do you think it wouldn't be like compromising if everyone compromise, with the result that will be coming from the Supreme Court, whether looking at them, there might be this enfranchised though? It wouldn't be a compromising aspect?
Well, if you have two contending sides and you have to rule on the matter that involves the opposing side, yes, one person will have to consider themselves losing in some regards, but the country wins. You understand me? And nobody can go beyond the Supreme Court to seek any other ruling or opinion on this matter. The Supreme Court is correctly named after the word supreme. There's nothing after that in this country. So that's why the decision of the Supreme Court has to not only be carefully done, but meticulously applied.
Yeah, I'm Eugene Devin. I report for Joy FM. The Supreme Court is the arbiter of justice.
Final.
Yes. So, would anyone question the authority of the Supreme Court? Because no one, the Supreme Court, no one is allowed to question the authority. Whatever they say is honored.
Final.
So, why would you say that the Supreme Court should make wise decisions? The Supreme Court, as far as we are concerned, is the arbiter of justice.
Exactly. We will all be forced to abide by that. but there are consequences if we play politics with it. I'm just saying, when you look at the statue at the Temple of Justice, the Supreme Court, you find a lady there, the cloth covering the eyes, the monument signifying justice. Huh?
Linda Justica.
The eyes are covered. This signifies that the law is blind. It doesn't see individuals. It sees right, it sees wrong. You understand that? I'm just reminding them to be, because so far, I have to regrettably acknowledge that the Supreme Court have been lukewarm in this matter. You understand that? They have been lukewarm in making sure that their ruling were clearly understood in the country. Because if you have ruling going on and you have both sides interpreting it and acting accordingly, then it is incumbent upon you to set the record straight on what you said. Are you following me here?
Yeah.
And if you fail to do that, then there is a factor, a political ingredient that we can find in there. Because the situation has been dealt with lukewarm. You understand? And I noticed one of the justices interpreted that, made their position clear, and another lawmaker had gone up and said that's somewhat liquor talk or something like that. And these are things that we should avoid. Okay? We should avoid these things. That's why it's important that the Supreme Court not only come up with a ruling, but ensure that the ruling is clear to the point that everyone understands it.
So, don't you think the Supreme Court was trying to play a role that, okay, we don't want to meld into politics? That's why she was like, okay, let's say go back to status quo ante rather than we get into your business.
Well, I will agree with you. I've been in the Senate for 9 years myself, as Senior Senator of Maryland County.